What's going on, guys? And good morning, and welcome back to Miles of Horror. I'm your host, Robbie Miles, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful morning. It's 7:28 here in New York City, and I've been enjoying this a lot lately. Coming on here first thing in the morning while I'm drinking my coffee, just getting right into it. A lot of times I have time in the morning and I like to come on here when I'm alert and fresh and just waking up. I like to start my day with you guys. So if that's not a testament to dedication, I don't know what is. But anyway, thank you guys for hanging out. If you could please hit that like button, and if you aren't already subscribed, please do so. I would appreciate it. Today we are talking the best worst movie of all time. But in my opinion, the best movie of all time. I absolutely adore this movie, and I'm talking about none other than Troll 2.
So dizzy.
Kids with a sweet tooth like yours love ice cream.
Delicious and purified.
Delicious and purifying. uh, this video is going to be mostly spoiler free. There will be some moments when I get into some of the nitty gritty, and I will warn you beforehand. But this movie's 35 years old, so if you haven't seen it, I get it. I totally get it. Maybe you want to look away now, but I will be going some of the details on it. There will be some spoilering, so I'll try and give you guys a fair warning, heads up. But listen, it's Troll 2. This movie was dubbed the best worst movie for a reason. It's kind of hard to really spoil this movie. But anyway, if you don't want to know anything about the movie, look away now. I won't take it personally. It's all good. I will be talking about some of the major plot points and the ending. So I guess that is kind of spoiling some bit. Anyway, so Troll 2, 1990. Okay, this movie came out when I was 4 years old. Or rather, I was actually 3 years old because I was born in 86. It came out in 1990, but it's October 12th of 1990, and I was born in November. So I was 3 when this movie came out. It was directed by a guy named Claudio Fragasso, who is one of my favorite Italian directors. He did Night Killer, Beyond Darkness, Zombie 3, Hell of the Living Dead. Some great titles among many others. And he actually wrote it under a pseudonym of Drake Floyd. I didn't know. In some of my research, I found that, which is kind of cool. Maybe he didn't want to, to be the likeness of his name or whatever. But anyway, so this movie came out in 1990, guys, which I'm going to go through that year of horror in just a second and give you the majority of movies that came out that year. And like, it kind of blew me away. That was like, honestly, like peak horror. Like the 90s was such an underrated era for horror. Like it was the tape store era. It was like we just peaked, guys. Like in mid 80s to through the 90s was just peak horror. And then things really slowed down in the early 2000s. But just the sheer amount of titles that came out. Like I usually like in a lot of my videos when I'm doing a review, I like to go into the year that the movie came out and that year in horror. And this year, like, when you get to the early 2000s, there's just not a lot of movies. There's just the titles that actually came out were very slow. It's like maybe, 20 movies that have been noted. And in 1990, like, there's like 50 movies on this list that are all big and all, it's just the amount of titles that came out in 1990, or just insane. So listen to this, okay? So Troll 2, 1990, you had Amityville Curse, Arachnophobia, Basket Case 2, Blood Games, Blood Moon, Brain Dead. You had Bride of Reanimator, Buried Alive, Child's Play 2, Cthulhu Mansion, Deadly Manor, Demon Wind, Demonia, Exorcist 3, Fear, Frankenhooker, The Gate 2, Graveyard Shift, Gremlins 2, Jacob's Ladder, Texas Chainsaw 3, Linnea Quigley's Horror Workout, Maniac Cop 1 and 2, Meet the Applegates, which I was going through this list and I'm like, you know what? That needs a release. I think Applegate's going to get a release sometime this year. I'm calling Vinegar Syndrome to do an Applegate release. Maybe on that maybe on that whatever line it was that they did, Showgirls. They've been doing a lot of 90s stuff. Anyway, Mirror Mirror, Misery, Night Killer, Pledge Night, Prom Night 3, Cycle 4, Puppet Master 2. I mean, listen to these titles. Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, Slumber Party Massacre 3, Starty House Massacre 2 and 3, The Suckling, you had Troll 2, Two Evil Eyes, Watchers 2, and The Witches. So, listen, trust me when I tell you that is a very large list of horror movies that came out. Okay, as the years went on and horror kind of moved into the background, into the early 2000s, the list of movies dwindled quite significantly. So this was a golden age. Like you could go to the theater and see new horror movies weekly. You know, now it's kind of like, yes, you can see movies, but the titles are not really. Let me put it this way. And, Garrett over at Born to Be Rad always talks about this. Back in the 80s and 90s, you could pitch a movie like Troll 2. You could pitch a movie like Slumber Party Massacre, and it was accepted. Like, now you these kinds of concepts, these out of the box concepts where you can get movies like this, like Reanimator and Bride of Reanimator and Brain Dead and Basket Case, these movies that have these outlandish concepts, are just had a big lull in the early and mid 2000s. Okay, now we're starting to see that, a boom of horror again, and we're getting some of these movies like The Substance, which is a brilliant movie and like beautifully written, and um the director Corley Fargeet is brilliant, but for a while, we weren't getting these outlandish, kind of ideas for horror movies. They're all very basic, and so I think we're starting to see the come around again. We're going to be getting these obscure movies, which I'm really excited about. But anyway, so 1990, yeah, it came out in 1990. I was 3.5 when it came out, and I watched Troll 2 when I was a kid with my dad. Okay, now if you are a fan of my channel, you watch my videos, a lot of my love of horror came from my dad. He showed me Suspiria and Troll 2 at a very young age, and some Subspecies and a lot of Full Moon stuff. So he had a Dawn of the Dead one sheet in his office growing up. So he was all about Italian horror. He loved everything about the genre. So he kind of introduced me to it, and I kind of went off my own direction. But so Troll 2. So Troll 2, first of all, I own it in two different formats. I have the overseas Eureka release. It is a Region B, but it's double pack. It's got Troll 2 and Troll Complete Collection. Kind of cool. And then I have the VHS, but I have actually two copies. I picked this one up for super cheap, and it's kind of busted. So the tape works great, but I wanted to pick up one that was the more green and actually like had the coloring still. So yeah, I own this movie in two different copies, three different copies, two formats, and so Troll 2 for me was a major gateway horror movie. Okay, for me it's like Killer Clowns, Troll 2, Ernest Scared Stupid. It's like that. Those are the three like biggest influences on my horror life, and think the movies that really made me fall in love with the genre. It's like those three. And maybe that tells you a little bit about kind of like the body horror that I love, and the transformative metamorphosis horror that I love, and the cheap puppets and all that. For whatever reason, the Chiodo brothers and Claudio Fragasso, the effects that they used and the animation, or the puppets and the effects that they used just hit me in it's such a unique way as a kid. I was terrified. This movie Troll 2, guys, kept me up. I can't even tell you how many nights as a kid, because it was so terrifying to me. Now, you could say as an adult, yeah, I mean, there's a whole documentary out there in 2009 calling it the best, worst movie ever. And listen, there's some very suspect dialogue. The plot is outrageous. Things like bologna sandwiches come into play. And I'm not disagreeing with any of that. But this is a terrifying movie for anybody, not just a kid. This is a terrifying movie, truly, and I truly believe that. Um, one of the things that was really popular in the 90s was this trope of kids being isolated and left alone. And you see it right from the beginning of the movie. Basic premise, let me just go over that. Josh is a little kid in the movie whose acting is phenomenal, by the way. The majority of the acting in this movie is absolute dog shit. And that's one of the reasons why people refer to it as the best first movie, because the acting is so ridiculous and some of the one-liners are just it's classic. It's classic B horror movie. But the main kid in it, Josh, did a phenomenal job. His acting was, I think he went on to do a lot of other things. I have to look that up. I didn't do my research, but the main kid, Josh, in the movie was a phenomenal actor. Like he played the role of his life in Troll 2. Dare I say that? The role of his life in Troll 2. Anyway, so Josh, the kid in the movie, and his family are doing a little bit of a house swap, they call it, with a family from the town of Nilbog, which is just goblin backwards, which is a nice touch on Fragaso's part. And basically, the town is run by goblins who are trying to force the family to eat plant food. Okay. Now, listen, if you really don't want to know any more about the movie, turn the video off now because I will be going to some of the spoiler stuff. Etc. So the town's run by these goblins that are trying to force them to eat plant food, which will basically turn them into like green goo for the goblins to eat. Now, as a concept, in theory, it is scary, right? It is a scary thing to be turned into plant food and eaten by these goblins. It sounds silly, but when it boils down in the movie, it doesn't feel like plant food. It feels like you're being melted. And it's a very like they do show it and it's very scary. And that really stood out to me as a kid as just a terrifying way to die, I guess. And again, I think the goblin like mask that they use and the makeup is just I don't know how to explain it. It's that very like latexy feel. I don't know. But anyway, so the town of Nilbog, and the inhabitants are human, right, on arrival, but the goblins have the ability to kind of turn in and out into and out of like human form. So you see them as both humans and as the goblins, and numerous times throughout the movie, they'll just like flip both back and forth, and you'll see them as the goblins, then kind of the people from the town. And there's this one elderly woman. She was an elderly in the movie, so this is a long time ago at this point. And she has these big, like square glasses or these big round glasses, and they're just like she's kind of like a scary looking lady in human form. And then they go to like the goblin form, and she has that same kind of vibe. It's like the features are just kind of the same, and you could tell which one is her. And it's just I don't know, old lady horror creeps me out. Like I that's why I love rabbit grannies. So the premise of this movie is absolutely bonkers, and the inhabitants of Nilbog, even in human form, like forget about goblin form, even in human form, creep me out. There's like a main pastor gentleman who's kind of like the leader of the goblins in Nilbog, and he's very forceful, and he did a great job acting too. So there's scenes when like they're trying to get the family to eat the plant food and yada yada, and the pastor is like very forceful, and he sits them down, and there's just a tone about this movie almost throughout the entire thing. It's where there's just an isolation. They get to this town where I think they said there's 25 total people in Nilbog, and you just get a feel for the isolation. And that to me was a very scary concept as a kid, where there's no one around to help you. Okay. And that was big in the 90s, most notably for kids, parents who don't believe them. And, throughout the movie, Josh is trying to warn his parents that these are not real people. They're goblins. And of course, they keep talking them down like, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. And that was so big. And the Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark and all these childhood, horror, stories of the 90s. And so, that concept of being isolated, what didn't just work for the kid, but it works for the whole family when they get to Nilbog. So they get there, and the family is, basically slowly being acclimated to what's going on in Nilbog, and eventually it boils into this house scene where the family shows up, and the pastor and like everyone there is just playing like acoustic guitars and like country music, and like, we wanted to apologize for earlier and bring you folks in and just share our food with you. And it's just, they sit them down and they all surround them, and it's just like, it's, I don't know, it's just very it's terrifying, it's very real. And so this movie, I know, best worst movie ever, but it is terrifying. There are legitimate scares, things that are jumping out of mirrors. There's a lot of body horror, people being transformed into green goo and eaten. And like, when you see the goblins eat this goo, they're like slurping it up with their hands, and it's like, this was just a human 3 seconds ago. And they show you kind of like there's the transformation. Oh my goodness. I love this movie so much. I watched it again last night just for some research. Um, so yeah, so the movie itself is just all throughout it's really it's freaky, and the goblins themselves do a wonderful job of keeping those scares. And throughout the movie, Josh looks to his dead grandpa to kind of help him out, and he kind of sees visions of him throughout who helps him. He alerts him to the fact that he needs to eat a bologna sandwich to kill the goblins. And again, like, it's bad shit, and like the concepts and kind of the plot holes are many, but it makes it you gotta have the plot holes, you gotta have the shitty puppets, you gotta have the shitty special effects. It's what makes it so special. It's like the Star Wars effect, right? Like, you can't replicate that magic of Star Wars. You gotta have the shitty puppets like Yoda. Um, and that's what made it so special for fans. It's the same thing. I mean, I know that they're not the same two kinds of things, but it's the same thing for me when it comes to Troll 2. The shittiness of it makes it so special to me. So, those big tropes of the 90s, the isolation, the kids feeling like they have no one to turn to, their parents don't believe them. It all kind of culminates for me in the ending. And again, another spoiler here. I'm going to go through the ending. So if you haven't seen this movie, shut it off now, look away. But at the end of the movie, like I mentioned, the kid needs to eat a bologna sandwich to kind of kill the goblins, and go to Stonehenge and put his hands on the stone and whatever. So they end the goblin. They all like kind of explode and melt. And so the family drives back to their town. And they go back to their house. They escape Nilbog and kill the goblins, etc. But throughout the movie, the calling card of the goblins is kind of like this whisper that you hear throughout the movie. And at the end of the movie, Josh and his mom go back to the house. His dad goes to the office. His sister goes to her boyfriend's. And Josh is sitting in his room. And he's about to take a nap. And he starts hearing those whispers again. And he calls to his mom. And she does not answer. And he goes into the shower. And he sees the shower. The water coming down is all green plant goo and gross green stuff. And he's like, oh shit, what's going on? Yada yada. And he walks down the stairs, and a baseball, okay, gets like rolled down the carpet towards him, and he picks it up. And I forget the exact verbiage that it says, but it says, you're in green like plant goo. Oh my goodness. It is so scary. It says, your mom tasted good, or something like that. And he goes into the kitchen, and the goblins are slurping up his mom with their hands. And it's just like, and then it just cuts to the end. Mic drop on that ending. I really can't fathom how much I adore this movie. And I think, the fact that, again, at the end, this kid is isolated and completely alone, and his mother's being eaten, but like, it is terrifying. And so that trope, to me, that 90s trope of feeling isolated, feeling alone, is how the movie kind of fades out, and the kid has no one to look to, and his whole family's gone, and it's like, it's just a powerful ending. Call it what you will, call it the best worst movie, whatever you want to call it. I think this is the best movie. I love Troll 2, and it has grown considerably on my list. I dare I even say this is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Dare I say it? And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I adore this movie so much. So listen, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It is fantastic. If you have seen it, hit me up in the comments, guys. When was the last time you watched Troll 2? Because I watch it probably once every 2 years or so. And I watched it on VHS this time. And it just hits for me, guys, in all the right ways. I adore this movie. So there you have it. Troll 2 deep dive 1990s horror. One of the greatest years of horror of all time. This movie gets a yeah baby from me.
Yeah, baby.
And I will catch you guys on the flip. Peace.